Hello, welcome to the first episode on how to create a simple online game. First thing we'll need is Nakama. Nakama is an open source game server developed by Heroic Labs. It is a fantastic tool to get us started and develop our online games. Out of the box, Nakama provides us with authentication, meaning you can sign in with Google, Facebook, Apple, or your own custom authentication. It provides us with peer-to-peer networking or relayed multiplayer, and also provides server authoritative multiplayer, which means the server controls all of the multiplayer logic. But first, let's talk about how an actual online game works. There are two main types of ways we can make an online game. The first one is relayed multiplayer. Relayed multiplayer is when the client creates the server on their machine, allowing other players to join their session, compared to the server authoritative multiplayer, where the server controls every player and their state, and all the game logic is held within a server.
We're going to be using ct.js for a front-end game engine. It is a JavaScript game engine, so it's really easy to pick up. I'm using one of the example projects which has already like a platformer and a little character you can move about as a kind of base to get our online game working. Just for you guys to kind of understand how online games work, what it takes to get someone to join it, to list the matches, stuff like that.
So there are a couple of things that you'll need before we get going. You'll need Docker installed on your machine, or Docker Compose if you're on Linux or Mac. You'll need ct.js, which is the JavaScript game engine that we'll be using. And lastly, you'll need to download the Nakama plugin for ct.js. So without further ado, let's get started, and I'll show you all the steps to get us up and ready to start making our online game.
So the first step is to install Nakama with Docker Compose. So for me, I'm on Linux. This is going to be the same for Mac users as well. For Windows, it's going to be practically the same, except for one caveat, which I'll get into once we reach that step. So the first thing you want to do is just create a folder where your server wants to sit. So me, I'm just going to go to my development folder on my system and just create a folder Nakama. Open this up in VS Code or your favorite IDE. Great, so now we just have an empty VS Code workspace. Now the second thing that we want to do is get Nakama running with Docker Compose. They've nicely provided a Docker Compose file for us, so let's just copy all of this. Copy, go back to VS Code, and call this Docker Compose. So I've created a new file called dockercompose.yml, and I've just literally pasted everything on the documentation. So if I save that, now here's the caveat if you are a Windows user. You'll want to quickly change the Nakama volumes directory to your own directory on your file system. And what that means is if we go back to the file, if we go back to VS Code and we go to Nakama and we find volumes, there you go. You just change line here, line 31, to be your directory on Windows. This is to allow Docker to know where your workspace is on your Windows machine. Also make sure to include this :/Nakama/data for it to know where the data is. But if you're on Linux or Mac, you can leave it just like that and it should work. So now the second step is to actually run this Docker Compose with Docker. And the way to do that is just to open up your terminal. On Windows you can use the command line. And if we just go to where we have this Docker Compose, we can see here this is where our Docker Compose file lives. And we just do sudo, go to documentation. We just literally have to run this command into our terminal. Now I have to do sudo, you might not have to do sudo. Try it out, sudo, and then you'll see Docker Compose downloading all of the requirements for Nakama and then starting up the server. You might have noticed that after this we have a new modules folder in our directory, and this is where we're putting all of our game logic for the server, but that is for another later tutorial. Right now we can just leave it empty as it won't do any harm. Now the second step is to download ct.js. ct.js is the game engine that we're using to animate our characters, control them, and so on. It is a fantastic game engine. I've been loving it since I found it. It's very easy to use and intuitive. So if you go to ctjs.rocks, you can find the link in the description as well. Just click download and download the version for your machine. So now that I have my desktop, I'm just going to do ct.js. There you go. Now we have ct.js running. And I'm just going to make it into its own desktop here so we have it full screen. So now that we have ct.js installed, the second step is to download the plugin that will allow us to communicate between our Nakama server and ct.js. So we don't need ct.js right now, so let's just go back to our internet browser and go to GitHub where this plugin lives. Now this plugin is a mod for ct.js which will allow us to communicate between the Nakama server and our client game. So to download the plugin, go to the GitHub page where it lives, link is in the description like always, and just click over here on releases. Great, and now you should be able to download the latest release for this plugin if you just click on assets and download the zip folder. So now we want to get our plugin that we just installed into ct.js. And the way to do that is just open up an example tutorial. We'll use the platform tutorial for now. And if you click over here on catmods, scroll all the way to the bottom, click import modules, and click on the zip folder that we downloaded. Great. So if we scroll all the way back to the top, if we just check networking over here to filter out all of the plugins, and we get to see here the plugin that we just downloaded, ct.nakama. If we just click enable, you will see the settings pop up over here. And there we go. Now we have installed the plugin for ct.js, ct.js itself, and Nakama server. We are all set to get up and running in our online game. So that is episode 1 on how to get things up and running. In the next video, we'll be actually starting to implement the game logic and server logic to get another player up and running in our session. Stay tuned, and I will see you shortly.